just to officially welcome you, my name is Scott Simbucci. My company is Sales Qualia, and we focus on improving sales performance. So the way we do that is through advisory work, through workshops, we do that through knowledge products, and so, what's that? Oh, yes. And so we've been working with PARISOMA now. This is the second time we've done a workshop here. Thank you to Claire, everyone, for joining, for organizing all this. If you don't know Claire, she's, what's your official title here?
Startup Services Manager.
Startup Services Manager. So she's queen of awesomeness, I should say. So she's fabulous to work with, and if you've never been to PARISOMA, it's a great buzz here every day. So I highly recommend checking it out.
I can say that.
There you go. We have 2 hours allotted today, and the concepts that we're going to go through today, we could literally take 2 days to do. So we're going to go pretty quick, and so today's very aggressive schedule is to focus you and your company around designing a sales framework that you can use to find your first customer and then replicate what you did with that first customer, and then find hopefully 10 more, and then 100 more, and then 1,000 more, and then after that you can IPO and send me a thank you card after that. So you can see these are very active outcomes that we're looking for: constructing the framework. You're going to be evaluating gaps and voids, identifying buyer type, stages of the sale. And so the key here is that most of what the time we're going to be spending today is you doing things. So a lot of the information that we're going to be developing is already inside of your head. And the idea here is to formalize it and to structure it in a way and to give you that framework and to pull everything together. So in the interest of time, I know that everybody's got a different diverse background in different companies. And rather than go around the room and tell everybody what you do right now, throughout the course of the workshop, after you do a little bit of work, I'm going to ask people to share some of their answers and some of the concepts that they've come up with, and at that time, I might ask you, tell us the 2 seconds version of what you do. I think that will save us a lot of time and allows us to jump right into the content. Everybody good? Yep. I just got the nonverbal agreement. We'll keep going. So you see, I handed out a little packet, and this is what's called the Sales Opportunity Canvas. So Troy was saying, oh, this looks really familiar. Anybody seen something like this before in terms of structure? Has anyone used the lean canvas or the business model canvas? Alexander Osterwald. And so the same concept applies if you've used those before. If you haven't used them, it's totally fine. We're going to walk through this page by page. And the idea here is that in a sales situation, if you've got your product, you're trying to reach customers, particularly around an enterprise, if you're doing a business-to-business sale, enterprise-level sale, it turns out it's a very complex system. You're going to be dealing with many buyers, you're going to be dealing with many decision makers. All those different buyers have different reasons that they want to buy your product. Some people might want to buy it because it saves money. Somebody else in that exact same company might want to buy it because it decreases the risk of operating in that same company. You're going to deal with different objections along the way, questions that your prospects are going to ask, and you're going to have to deal with different stages of the sale. And so rather than thinking about the sale on a very linear basis, that you take one step and then another step, it turns out that you need to think of it as one whole complex system. And that's the idea behind this opportunity canvas, is to bring all of these different major components that you're going to be dealing with in that sale into one place so you can view it. And so what we're going to do is start in the middle with customer needs and work our way through the canvas in kind of a figure 8, and then handle the bottom 2 panels. And in each one of these panels is where you're going to be doing the work. So, we good so far? Good. So the first thing I want you to do is, I drew these myself. This is why I do sales and not graphic arts. So I want you to start by thinking about a prospective customer. So when I say customer, that's a specific account. And it could also mean a specific person within that account. So that's why I have the pictures. Oh, you need one? That's why I have pictures of people up there. So I want you to visualize that person that you are approaching. It might be somebody you're already engaged with, and somebody who said, hey, I'm really interested in your product, and I think our company could really use it, and I want to introduce you to more people. It could be, if you're early stage and you haven't quite gotten that far, it could be the person that you've imagined in your mind as your target buyer. And take 2 minutes and think about that person, not just the company or the logo of the company, think about the person themselves, the him or the her. Think about what type of office environment do they work in? Do they work in a very open environment like this, or do you have to go to the 45th floor of some office building there? Is it a stodgy place or is it a more open place? How do they dress? Do they dress more formally? Do they dress more informally? And what this does is start to crystallize for you the type of person you're going to be thinking about throughout the course of the rest of the exercises, because that's the only way you're going to be able to really manufacture the framework that we need, is by thinking about the specific people that you're going to be approaching. So take 2 minutes and you can just use your own paper or flip over the workbook on the back and think about who that is and just write down all the description about that person, what they're wearing, where they work, how they dress. Are they a senior person? Is it a junior person? Is it a company that's been around for a long time? Is it a very conservative company, or is it a more innovative company? So take 2 minutes to do that.
If you really feel like you could reach a wide audience, should you split into segments?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're going to do that down the road. For now, just think about the one person. If somebody told you, Daniela, you have 1 day to go find one person to buy your product, who would that person be? There's no wrong answer, just write stuff down. This is just an exercise, a mental exercise to get you going. Hi, how are you? You got one open seat there already. Okay, there is. Yeah, right here. I'll take it. Thank you. Thanks. So just about 1 more minute. Think about all different things about this person. Are they the kind of person that's eat at their desk and keep going? They come into the office early, they stay late. What are their hobbies? What kind of cars do they drive? Anything you can do to think about who this person is. Five seconds. Pencils down. You guys are quiet, you must be tired. Okay. It's usually good for a few laughs. So, everybody have a clear picture in their mind so far? Good? Okay. So, we're going to jump right into the canvas and start with the center panel here, which is customer needs. So, why do you think we start with customer needs? What's the reason we start with customer needs? Well, it's science, it's actually smart, and we're going to do it anyway.
That's why they buy.
That's why they buy?
Well, that's the only thing that makes you survive.
It's fundamental human, what was that?
Oh, I just mean if you're trying to sell something, they're the only reason you can exist. It's the customers.
It's the only reason you can exist, exactly. I mean, when you started your company and you started building your product, you started building the product not because you thought it was a lot of fun. I'm sure it is fun or you wouldn't be doing it. You started this because you determined that there is some fundamental need that is being unmet. And at the end of the day, nobody cares about your product. These are people. These are the people who care about your product. I'm going to say that again. These are people. These are the people that care about your product. So why do I say it that way? Thinking about customer needs. Do people care about your product?
They care about
They care
their
about
problem.
themselves.
They care about their problem. They care about their needs. That's why we start with customer needs. So already this should maybe, for some of you, start shifting the way you're thinking about how you communicate what you do. We'll get into some more specifics about this. When somebody asks you about your company or your product, are you talking to a bunch of people about your product? Nobody cares? Or are you thinking about customer needs and why somebody actually would want to buy your product? So if you think about the enterprise, when we talk about the enterprise sale and people within a large organization, there's only four fundamental reasons why people buy products. And we're talking about in an enterprise, business to business setting. So those four reasons are to increase revenue, decrease cost, big revenue, small cost, increase efficiency, or decrease risk. And I'll make the slides available to you too as well.
How about gaining time?
What's that?
How about gaining time?
Gaining time is efficiency. So as an example, name any product that you guys want.
Sales
What's that?
plus.
Sales what?
Plus.
Salesforce? Right, okay, so if you're selling to a VP of sales, if you're selling Salesforce, CRM, customer relationship management, why would a VP of sales choose to buy Salesforce? What is the primary reason somebody would want to buy Salesforce if you were a VP of sales?
Sales.
How does the CRM help you increase sales? It increases efficiency. That's the real sale. Salesforce actually doesn't care about salespeople. I mean, you can tell that because their UI is work. And if you ask people that use Salesforce, I use Salesforce. I don't use Salesforce because it's an elegant UI. I use Salesforce because I can extract information and it increases the efficiency around my day. I can identify people I need to contact. I can identify what opportunities are available, what stage they're in. And so the CRM is really an efficiency. To the person that is buying that product, who is the VP of sales, they care about increasing efficiency. Does that make sense? Name another product. Let's do it this way. Name a product that somebody would buy specifically to, say, decrease risk.
Insurance.
Insurance. Yeah. What's another one?
Automatic backup server.
A backup server. Yeah, if you're a CTO and maybe you've got a big, you're outsourcing all of your servers to Dell, well, you might have some backup facility location in a bunker in the ground that you hope you never use. It's the same as insurance, right? Okay. So that CTO that's buying that server, that backup server, they're not buying it to increase efficiency because they hope they actually never use that server. They're buying it to decrease risk. So these are the four primary reasons why anybody would actually buy your product. So when you start thinking about how you would frame why somebody would buy your product, it's really based on one of those four things. So the first exercise that we're going to do on the opportunity canvas is in the customer needs. Think about these four areas: revenue, decreasing cost, increasing efficiency, or decreasing risk. And think about the fundamental reason that your customer would buy your product. It may end up being two or three, and that's okay. I think if there was only one, if there was one and only one reason why somebody would buy your product, what would it be?
Just one.
What's the core? Yeah, what's the core reason? And if you know quickly what those four, one of those four are, then write out the reason why. So don't just write increased revenue. Write down why you think your product increases revenue for someone, or why you think your product decreases cost, or increases efficiency, or decreases risk. If you feel pretty strongly there's a good second reason, then write that one down. What would the second reason be, and specify why you think it's the second reason. You have about 30 seconds. Okay. How was that? Is that hard? Easy? Easy? Why was it easy? You said it was easy.
Good.
Why was it easy for you?
Because I know my customers, and I know my product.
Tell us what's the 20 seconds about what your company is, and then tell me why, which of these four and why.
All right. So my product is it's called VisuX. It's software that manages.
Tell them.
skyscrapers.
You already told me.
Yes, okay. Manages skyscrapers, big building in terms of security and energy, and so allows builders and facility managers to decrease their costs in terms of energy efficiency and its efficiency also. And there's another feature is like care about the environment because it uses less energy for building.
So if they care about the environment, what do you think that real secondary reason is? What was that? Cost? I don't know. Environmental products sometimes are more expensive.
It's another sales argument.
Why is it a sales argument? Which of the four does it fall under?
Revenue?
It's risk.
It's risk.
Risk,
I think it's risk. I mean, I think you might be able to say, well, somebody is going to want to use my products because it's environmentally sound and it's going to increase my revenue. That's a little squishy to me. I think the real reason is that it decreases risk. And that's a secondary. I think, and you mentioned in the beginning that you feel like they're buying your product because it increases efficiency. It allows the builders to communicate faster, better, more clearly.
Right.
It reduces errors, so it's an efficiency level. Good. Okay.
Thanks.
Good. So the idea here is that I want to get you thinking about customer needs. This is the obligatory Steve Jobs reference slide. I was told that I have to do a Steve Jobs slide every presentation. Otherwise, it's not real technology. It's Silicon Valley. That's also a joke. You guys are a tough crowd. All right, thank you for that. So the idea, of course, is just thinking about customer needs. And so as you start thinking about those needs, one of the things that becomes challenging is that the customer, when you start interviewing them and talking with them, they tell you what their stated needs are. So that VP of sales may say, well, we're looking for a CRM because our sales are really down and I feel like our sales reps are not performing very well, so we feel like we had a better CRM, then our sales reps would be able to sell more product. Okay, that's their stated need. Their actual need is they need to increase efficiency of their sales force, of their sales team. The second challenge that you have is that the status or the importance of that need ranges. It can be an implied need, which is something pretty basic, and it may be a pain in the neck, but it's not a huge problem. So we have somebody asked me before how many cars our family has. We're a two-car family. We have a Honda Civic that's about a year old, and we have a 2002 Saturn. And that Saturn, I don't even know why it still runs. Like, the brakes squeak, the rear view mirror is jiggly, the tires are worn, the brakes are just a little soft. There's all these problems that I have. These are all problems I can live with. The problems that the car still works. I can still drive around town. It still gets where I want to go. It's not a huge need. Now, if the brakes stop working, that becomes an explicit need. That's a huge problem. So if you're thinking about these two challenges of understanding the difference between what the customers are telling you their needs are versus their actual needs, and then thinking of it in terms of how big is this problem to that organization across how they operate, these become very difficult challenges for you, because now if you've been thinking about your product and you've been thinking about the market, but you haven't thought about the needs set of the customer, and you haven't thought about how important these needs are to the customer and how well they're articulating it to you, now all of a sudden, even before you get started in the sales process, you're going to have a breakdown. Because you could have a situation where somebody goes, yeah, that seems like pretty cool technology, I'd love to take a demo, I'd love to get a beta, love to get a login, send me a login. And you're like, oh yeah, great, love to send you a login. And then they log into your software, you call them back in 2 weeks and they don't answer, you send them an email, they don't answer, you finally get them on the phone a month later, like, yeah, we looked at it, really wasn't for us. It's because you didn't have an opportunity to establish what those true needs are for the client. Make sense? So you gotta get them, you gotta get to the truth. Right? What movie is this from? A Few Good Men. Probably some people in this room that haven't seen this movie because it's been out for like 20 years. So when we're thinking about this idea of stated needs versus actual needs, and thinking about implicit needs and explicit needs, the way that you uncover this for the client and help the client understand what these needs are is by asking questions. So before you jump to a demo, before you talk about your product, before you talk about it's a cloud-based service and it's built in Ruby and it's hosted here and it's really awesome, none of that stuff matters until you can understand what those needs are from the customer. So there's several different ways, different frameworks that you can use to ask questions. The one that I like to use is called SPIN, because it's really easy to remember. And so it's a four steps of questions. The first one is situation questions. And so, just like the name states, you're trying to assess what is the current state of affairs. So, who wants to volunteer and tell me what their company does and what is a basic situation question that you could ask to one of your clients? Just one. Don't everybody jump in.
We do consulting
You do
for
consulting?
mobile and web development, and situation probably they have an idea and they cannot build it themselves.
Okay. So what's a specific question you could ask to that? So let's say you're at a meetup event and you start talking to somebody and they go, oh yeah, I've got a couple of ideas I'd love to build prototypes on, but I'm not an engineer. Like what would be a type of situation question you could ask that person?
Do you have a good idea that you think you can make it big?
That's fair. What's the second one? What's another good situation question?
Are you an engineer?
That's a good question. What's another one? I'm going to keep pushing you because you're doing well. Keep going.
What do you mean the situation?
You want to assess what is, you want to sort of get the status. What is the situation right now at that target account? Good one?
Well, you could ask, what's your idea?
What's your idea? That's a good one. Sure. You want to assess what is the present operation. It's fact finding. So this is the basic core of what the company does. In your case, if it's outsourcing, you might ask, have you ever thought of, are you planning to learn how to engineer yourself? Are you going to learn how to code? Or do you think you were going to outsource this? That's a situation question. Because it helps you understand. If they're saying, well, no, I'm going to spend a bunch of time on GitHub and I just bought a bunch of books on Ruby and Python and I'm going to sit down in my basement and figure out how to code myself, do this prototype myself. Okay, now I understand what your situation is. Now later on, you could actually ask questions that we'll get to that could expose a need for that person. But understanding where they are, what is their mental state, is a really good way to think about this current situation. Make sense? So the P in SPIN is a problem questions. So this is where you're focusing on difficulties and dissatisfactions. So the idea here of a problem question is taking what you've learned in a situation question and starting to expose for yourself and for the client what problems may emerge or may exist within their organization. So is it Sofian?
Yes, yeah.
Sofian?
Yes.
So in your case, you've got this software you're selling to builders.
Right.
What is a problem question that you might ask?
The problem question I would ask to the builders is, what you guys are using right now as a software to manage?
Is that a problem question?
Yes, because they don't have the right tool. I mean, they don't even have the tools.
Are you sure it's a problem question? What kind of question is that?
Situation. That's right.
Situation question. You're assessing the current state of affairs, right?
Yeah.
What software are you using right now? Or are you using any software right now?
That's true.
So they say, oh, you know, we just do everything with yellow pads and we have some Excel spreadsheets we like to log stuff on. Okay, good to know. So what's a problem question that you could ask as a follow-up to that?
Right. What are you guys doing to save energy for your building?
How's that?
No, it's not.
Anybody else want to go? I don't mean to keep picking on you, so
Yeah.
think about it. Go
Well,
ahead.
I had an example of something he could ask.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's just like, how can I help you do business more efficiently? Would that be a way to?
I think something more like, what are your problems with your current workflow? That
There you
would
go.
try to-
Perfect. So if you're writing all this stuff on pads, is like what kind of communication issues arise as a result of that? Do communication issues arise? Or maybe they just have a bunch of fax machines everywhere and they can just fax stuff and that's how they solve the problem. But you want to ask what problems may exist as a result of your current situation or your current system. Question?
Will the question at this point be how much money you're spending on energy
Yeah.
in the building? Is
That would be a good way, because you're thinking about difficulties and dissatisfaction. Well, I would say actually how much money you're spending right now is situation,
Okay.
but then you could ask a follow-up question to that, which might be, if you're thinking about energy efficiency, how is that relative to budget? Or, you know, if your expenditures are, I don't know, $25,000 a month on energy, if there was, how does that compare to what you planned for? Because they might go, well, we actually planned for 15, or that's a big check to write. So that's a problem type of question. So the third question in SPIN, the I, is an implication question. So so you started with situation, and then you said, okay, I understand you're using pad and paper and Excel sheets. And then the problem question, which is the one that you had introduced, which was what?
What are the problems in your current workflow?
Yeah, what kind of issues pop up in your current workflow? And then the third, the implication, is what are the effects of those? So we'll continue with this process. You've got pad and paper using Excel. What issues arise? Well, you know, occasionally stuff, you know, hard to read people's penmanship. You know, they're standing on a work site, they're jotting stuff down. Every once in a while, the number, you know, a 5 looks like a 3. That gets put into the order, and now all of a sudden we have the wrong materials show up, or the wrong quantity of materials. Like, okay, that sounds like a problem. So what is the implication? What are the effects of those? Well, the wrong materials show up, then I've got to reorder, puts everything behind. I've got to wait, especially if it's a special building material. Then sometimes I have to wait 2 weeks because I can't just go down to the corner store and get a replacement. So these are now, the implication of this situation is one that's, you've now grown. You've gone from, okay, I kind of have this problem where I'm jotting stuff down, to you're building this problem to become bigger and bigger. You're moving it from an implicit need to an explicit need, from a basic problem to a big problem. And then finally, the last question that you would ask is a need payoff. So now that we know your situation, your problem, and the implications of that problem, how could I fill that gap? How could I solve that problem for you? So what is the value or utility that your customer would see from your proposed solution? So we'll bring this through. You got paper and pencil and Excel. That's your situation. The problem is you run into some workflow issues. Then the implication of that is, well, sometimes we actually order the wrong stuff and it puts the project behind 2 weeks, not to mention the fact that we lost that money that we spent on the bad material. So what's the need payoff question that we could ask in this situation? What would be the value that your system could bring to them?
How could you save time and, I mean, it has to be the level of conversations.
Sure.
What would they say? How could you save money and budget?
Yeah, if, you know,
Yeah.
would it be
Save time budgeting for the current situation.
would it be nice to save to remove all of that hassle
Yeah.
and be able to know that when somebody puts in an order, it's the correct one?
Right.
Yes, that would be nice value. I'd get a lot of utility out of that. So that's the questioning framework. Is this making sense? So this takes a lot of practice, and so this is why we actually do it. And before we do the next exercise, this is based on the idea that you're going out and talking to people that may not know that you exist as a company, may not know your product exists, and they may not know fundamentally that their need exists. So you're kind of building up this awareness from the customer. Now you hope, as a startup, as a new company, that you find people in this situation. Like you hope that by starting your company, you've found a market niche or a customer need that's so great that it's like a cat in the middle of the pool. You're like, get me out of here. And if you show up to save this cat in the pool, like it's pretty easy for you to establish the value. I'd like to teach the questioning framework because it's important not to just assume that just because you see the problem in the market and you see the niche, it doesn't mean the customers have seen the problem in the niche. So the customers may be in this situation and they don't even know it. And that's why you have to walk through this questioning framework and be prepared. And later on in the opportunity canvas, we'll talk about how you map that out. Does that make sense? So the next exercise, if you open up to the back of the first page, you'll see it's the same panel. It's the customer needs panel. It's just blown up. It's bigger for you. And so I want to take about 7 minutes for you to think about, actually write down 2 questions of each kind: situation, problem, implication, need payoff for your product, for your company. And remember, in the beginning we talked about that. Who is that customer? You're thinking about that customer in your mind. So imagine you've got 15 minutes with this person. You went to a conference and some kind of event, and you said, look, you want to meet for coffee? And they go, sure, we'll meet you for coffee. I got 15 minutes. How could you develop a questioning framework that would help them understand how big their need is, and how you can position yourself as a solution to a problem and not just another product? So 2 situation questions, 2 problem questions, 2 implication questions, and 2 need payoff questions. And I'll just wander around in case anybody has any questions about the questions. You may find that the first questions, the situation questions, were actually really easy. And the problem questions were pretty easy. As you move up the framework, you might find it more difficult to come up with an implication question or an payoff question, and that's good. about halfway there. Another minute and a half. Make sure you're writing these as questions. Sometimes when I look at and talk to people, they have bullet points about, well, my customer has this problem, my customer has that problem, or I can help them here. It's important to write it out as a question, because that's how you're going to be communicating it as you're sitting with that client. Is it a where question, or is it a how question, or is it a what question? Everybody get through it? Still writing? Partial credit. You get partial credit in this class. I'm not going to grade anything, I promise. Okay. So everything we've talked about has been focusing on customer needs and thinking about how are you going to communicate, how are you going to get that customer to communicate their needs to you? It's all been that it's all the centerpiece of everything that you're going to be doing for the sales situation. So before we move on to the next part, would anybody like to share what they've come up with in terms of what's one question of each that you've come up with?
For my particular product?
Tell them to.
Oh, so I invented a kind of multilingual keyboard that allows for more efficient multilingual speed typing, so you can type several languages with the same keyboard. And so I guess just to fill out the situation, my first questions would be like, how many languages do you speak, or what languages do you speak? How often do you write in them? Or if they don't speak another language, do you have kids who are learning that language in school, or
Okay.
a family member?
Those are two really good situation questions because it helps you determine if that person in front of you is a potential customer immediately, or if they are not, because maybe they only speak English, but their kids are taking Spanish in school, you've immediately found another reason to continue the sales conversation. So good, keep going. What would be a problem question or two?
I would ask if they ever find themselves unable to produce certain characters, and if they find themselves like Googling for words or spending excessive amounts of time inserting special characters.
Very good. So somebody might Google and then just copy and paste that. Google. Yeah, I do that. Because I don't have your keyboard, nor do I know a second language.
Yeah.
So it is. Good. Okay. What would an implication question be?
I would ask if miscommunications are frequent because of that,
Okay.
or if that's ever happened, or if they find that really frustrating.
Maybe
And
they're
lose their train of thought with all the copying and pasting.
good one. That's a very good one. Okay. And what would a need payout question be?
Well, I would say, wouldn't it be great to be able to type in all these languages for all your clients' names correctly. That's one that I tell people who don't speak languages. It's like, oh, maybe you don't speak German, but you have a client whose name is Björn. And so I asked, would you like to be able to type all their names right? Do you think that could help with your overall presentation, or if that could help make a better first impression of your first client?
Nice. Very good. Round of applause for that. Good job. Everybody's had a pretty clear concept. Walking through that makes sense? Good. So moving on to the next panel. Anybody know what this is?
American Gladiators.
American Gladiators. Nice. So if you look on the panel, on the sheet here, we start in the middle, now we're going to kind of go up and to the left. We're talking about buyers and buyer types. So particularly in your case, you're talking about an individual consumer, Daniela. In what we're talking about here typically is an enterprise business-to-business sale. And so usually when you're selling any kind of software or service or product from yourself to another company, you're probably charging a couple $1,000s, tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's never one person that's going to be involved with that buying process. If you're selling to another organization, either there's not one person that's got the authority to write a check for $50,000, and if they do, they sure as heck are going to make sure they have their tail covered in case they buy your product and it doesn't work. They wanted to make sure they had consensus. So in either case, whether it's a requirement for that person to get approval from other people, or they just want to sort of make sure they have some kind of agreement that that purchase is good, you're going to encounter typically these four people. So the user buyer in the software sense, we talked about Salesforce. The user buyer of a Salesforce CRM would be who? The salesperson, definitely a user buyer. And who else might be a user buyer?
Managers.
Yeah, the manager as well. So you've got the salesperson and the sales managers, who are typically the ones that are in there every day using Salesforce. The VP of sales, in a lot of cases, they may never log into Salesforce, because once you run a report, and if I'm a sales manager, I can export into Excel a nice clean report that shows all of my pipeline and all of my revenue and all my prospective revenue. That's what, if I'm a VP of sales, I'm going to take that over to the chief financial officer and say, like, here's the pipeline, because the CFO might just take that and run it into their spreadsheet. So you've got these user buyers actually using the software, the sales reps and the sales managers. They're not the ones that get to make the decision about the purchase. That's who the economic buyers, that's the person who's actually writing the check. So depending on how big of the purchase it is, it may be just the sales manager, it may be a VP of sales, it may be a senior vice president of sales and marketing, it might be a chief operating officer, it might be the CEO. Depending on how big it is of a purchase, how big that check is, you're going to run into somebody who needs to write that check. It comes out of their budget, and especially in a big company, there's going to be different cost codes, for example. So if the VP of sales decides to buy Salesforce and it's, I don't know, say $25,000 a year for 10 site licenses or 10 seat licenses, they've probably got some code that they have to send to finance, and that's how finance knows when they go to write that check who to allocate that budget to. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the technical buyer, what's a technical buyer? What does that person do?
Like IT or CTO?
Yeah, if it's software, it's typically like IT, CTO, could be a VP of engineering. What if it's not software? Who could be a technical buyer?
Are they actually just the buyer? Their job is the buyer, possibly some of these within the department?
Not usually. Like in a retail setting, like Walmart, for example, they have professional buyers. That's their job, to go buy things. Those people are actually, a lot of times, none of these things. They're just coordinating between the economic buyer, the user buyers, and the technical buyer. But if I was selling a non-software product, if it's not an IT manager or a CTO, what would also be a technical tech buyer?
You might like a shop floor manager or something?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a factory and you're buying machinery or a big piece of like HVAC information, something like that, HVAC supplies, it might be that person that's on the floor. That once it's installed, they're just going to oversee how this machinery works, but they're also the only person that could probably tell the economic buyer how this thing actually works. Is it any good? Is it built with good materials? What's the reliability? What's the quality? All of those things. And then the fourth person is the product champion. What does the product champion do? Who is that person?
User?
Sometimes it's a user. Sometimes the product champion can be one of these three people. What is the function of the product champion for your interaction with the enterprise, for the sale? What does the
They're
product
gonna
champion
advocate
do?
for your product.
What's that?
They're gonna advocate for your product.
Yeah, they're an advocate, and they're not just an introduction like, hey, you seem like a really good guy, your technology sounds cool, go talk to Mary Smith, she's our CTO. I mean, this is the person who sees your product, loves your product, is like, we gotta use your product in my company. And in fact, I'm gonna help you. We're gonna set up meetings with our CEO and our CTO. And before we have that meeting, you and I should get together for coffee because I'm going to coach you about all the stuff that those people care about. So that person is a clear cheerleader, and they're really helping you push that sale. Now, there are times where the champion can be the user buyer. It might be, use the Salesforce example again, you could have like a senior salesperson at a company that doesn't use the CRM at all. And that senior salesperson got hired, and at their old job they used Salesforce and they loved it. And so now they're in this new company and they're telling their VP of sales, like, look, we gotta use Salesforce. Like, it's ridiculous, we don't have a CRM, we can't track our sales in Excel. And that senior salesperson, while they are the user buyer, they're actually not the decision maker, right? And they're not the technical buyer, they're just helping you shepherd that deal through. So as you're thinking about your 4 buyer types, each of those 4 buyer types may have a different motivation, right? So let's use the machinery example. So if you approach the CEO of a company and you say, look, with my new machine, you'll be able to increase the number of units that your team can produce. And not only will you be able to increase the number of units at the same time, but the quality will be better. And you'll be able to charge a price premium for this new product that you're able to build now. So now an economic buyer or a CEO might be thinking, wow, there's a really good reason why I should buy this product, and that's it. I can charge more. I can drive revenue. So that economic buyer, the CEO, might go, wow, with this new machinery, I'm going to make more money for the company. Now the shop foreman, who's dealing with this machinery every day, the old one keeps breaking down, it's a big headache. All the people that they're sitting around idly, not doing their job because this machinery is broken down, they might look at it and go, wow, I don't even care about the top line thing of the company, I don't care how much money we make. All I know is that when this old machinery breaks down, it's a huge pain in my neck. Because I either got to fix it, I got to find other things for these people that we're paying to do, find something for them to do, people complain, it's unsafe, there's all these other reasons. So that shop foreman may be thinking of it from an efficiency sake or from a risk perspective, because it could be a safety thing. So even within the organization, you've got these different buyers and they have different buyer motivations. So you have to think about what is the purchasing motivation of these 4 different buyer types, because it may end up being different. Make sense? So the next exercise, if you turn on your sheet, you've got a big version of that panel, buyer types. I want you to draw out just 4 columns and think about, write out the 4 buyer types: economic, user, technical, and product champion. If you have an existing sales opportunity that you're working right now, write out that person's name, just so you can think about matching the person you're talking to the type of buyer they are. And then just write down in the 3rd column what you think their motivation is. Is their motivation to increase revenue? Is it to decrease risk? Is it to increase efficiency? Or is it to decrease cost? And then we're going to do the fourth column in just a minute. Just leave that blank. Make sense? So this should go pretty quick. You're just writing down the 4 buyer types. If you have an existing client you're working, think about who the people are and then what that motivation is for those people. Another minute or two. These are your 4 buyer types, and thinking about, of these 4 buyer types, what are the reasons? What's the core reason that person would buy? Very good. Okay. So keep these people in mind because it affects how we complete the next part of the sales canvas. So we've started with customer needs, gone through questions and how you can uncover those needs and help the client understand those needs, whether they're explicit or implicit, are they stated or actual needs. Then we talked about the different buyers within that enterprise. So it's not just one person you're selling to, there's several people that you're selling to. And we know now that each of those different people respond to different motivation. The CEO may care about increasing revenue, the guy on the shop floor may care about efficiency and risk. So the third part of the sales opportunity canvas is thinking about this concept of value statements. Quick art test. Anybody know? It's a tough one. It's a Jackson Pollock. Worth $150 million. Yeah. It's amazing what you learn on Quora. So if anyone's interested, I think it's for sale. You know. So when we talk about value statements, this goes back to what I said in the very beginning, which is nobody cares about your product. Nobody cares about what your product does in terms of how it works. What they care about is what needs does your product satisfy. And so one of the critical ways you can think about a value statement is that if you can construct a value statement using numbers of some kind, then that typically means that you've got a very clear, very well clarified value statement. So if somebody came to me and said, for example, all right, Scott, you do all these workshops and these sales training, and I'm a CEO of a startup, what's the value to me? Well, I would want to talk with them in terms of how many new clients I think I could help them bring aboard in the next 3 months. So I think if we work together based on where your product is, we could increase your revenue by $120,000 because you've got a $10,000 product. I think we can get 12 new customers in the next 3 months. That would be a very specific value statement where I'm using numbers in a way to a startup CEO that they care about revenue for the most part. Am I right about that?
Very.
Yeah, okay. I know Arthur, I was cheating. So the idea of value statement construction is that it's never about your product, it's about the need that it solves for that buyer. So there's a really good quote. Anybody know Clayton Christensen? Heard of him before? The look you're nodding.
He wrote The Innovator's Dilemma?
Yeah, he did. And so he's written a couple other books. He's kind of an icon in Silicon Valley. And recently he wrote another book, and there's this idea of what job are your customers hiring you to do? Or what job are your customers hiring your product to do? And so he came up with a really interesting story to express this. He was working with a fast food company, and this fast food company realized there's a lot of people buying milkshakes in the morning. Couldn't figure out, it's really kind of odd, you wouldn't think of milkshake as breakfast food. And so they went in and started interviewing people that bought milkshakes. They said, why are you buying this milkshake? Well, it turns out that the people that were buying the milkshakes all had long commutes. They had to sit in their car for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour. And the milkshake was a really easy way to pass the time. Because it was thick, they could chew on the straw, it took a long time to eat. They'd get these big milkshakes. You're like, it kind of fills you up so you get to work, you're not hungry. Because you get a long commute, you might get up at 6 in the morning, you have breakfast at 6:30. By the time you get out of the house, in the car, to the office, at your desk, it's like 9. Now you're like at breakfast 2.5 hours ago, you're starving. So now you've got this milkshake in you, it kind of keeps you going till lunch. And so what they discovered is that the job that these people were hiring the milkshake to do was to entertain them and keep them full. It wasn't that they enjoyed drinking milkshakes. I mean, it was fun. But as they talked to the people that bought the milkshakes, it turns out that a lot of these people experimented with different things. Like some people tried candy, they found out it was like too sweet. Some people tried fruit, it was too messy because it would kind of, you eat an apple and it would drip on you. You get to work, you already have a stain on your shirt. So this idea of what job is your customer hiring you to do. And so ultimately the fast food restaurant, they actually changed their mix. So in the morning they would make it thicker and they would put out thinner straws, smaller straws. And it actually made the customers happier. Like, wow, this is like the best milkshake ever. It takes me forever. It takes me all the way to the time I drive into the parking lot of my office to finish this milkshake. But in the afternoon and the evenings, when the families come in with their kids, you don't want a thick milkshake with a small straw if your kid orders a milkshake. You have kids, right? You don't want to be sitting at McDonald's for like an hour while this kid is sipping on the milkshake. So they made the milkshake mix thinner, they made the straws bigger so that the milkshakes would get eaten faster. So understanding that fundamental human need, it wasn't about the milkshake, it was what need were they filling. So if you go back now to this 4-column grid, you understand who your buyers are, you understand why they're buying, and their motivation. Now think about a value statement for each of those buyers specifically, using numbers if you can. Bless you. Using numbers if you can, to frame your value statement in terms of the customer's problem, not your product. So you could say for an economic buyer, we help them increase revenue by 42%. For a technical buyer, we help them reduce the number of accidents on the shop floor by 40%. That is the value statement that you want to construct. So you're thinking about the buyer, and then you're thinking about it in their terms. What are their needs? What is their motivation?